Health coverage and the work requirement did or did it not do what the state hoped it would do. In Arkansas's capital city, a new mayor and his council confront a budget with little bend. First casinos, now cannabis, and no consensus. Can there be peace in the valley? And also, the locks and dams of the Arkansas River, an economic engine now in serious need of a tune-up. Arkansas Week in a moment.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. Arkansas is a little drier than it was at this point last week, but the situation for many is every bit as dire. Enormous losses to private and public property and a stalemate with nature along the state's largest commercial waterway. Later in our roundtable, politics, policy, and the environment. But up top tonight, Colonel Robert Dixon, engineer and commander of the U.S. Corps of Engineers for the Little Rock District, and A.J. Gary, director of the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management. Mr. Gary, let me start with you tonight, if I can. Give us an update on the situation. The water is receding, but obviously not as fast as everyone would like.
Right, and this is, of course, the first couple of weeks were the response phase of our operation, so we were responding to those needs. Now we're going into the recovery phase, and this recovery phase will last for months. So we have, we're doing the individual assistance, and we've gotten pretty well that going really good. We started earlier this week on what's called public assistance. So as the water goes down, we're looking at the impact it had on our roads, highways, and we started doing the assessment on that.
Public and private infrastructure, any way to gauge a dollar amount? Yeah.
It's really tough at this point. I mean, we have, approximately 3,000 homes impacted. We've moved really fast. I think on this disaster, we have our FEMA team, Joint Field Office is already set up here in Little Rock. And we have our disaster resource centers are being set up in the counties that have been impacted. We have got about 1,200 citizens have already registered on the FEMA for assistance, and we have a little over, well, close to 5 million already approved.
All right, and we've got how many counties now that have been formed?
We've got 12 counties that are impacted and under the disaster declaration. For individual assistance.
Yeah, Colonel Dixon, to you, that Arkansas River with its, and the whole system, I think 18 locks and dams.
That's right.
Yeah, you've got a big job. Do you know how big yet?
It's very difficult to tell, and very similar to what we're looking at on the private and business side of it, is there's still water and there's still a lot of assessing to do. The infrastructure did really, really well. The dams are fine. The locks are fine. We're having, in fact, out of the 13 locks and dams that are in Arkansas along the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River Navigation System, we've got 11 of those 13 already operational. So there's only 2 that are still having some trouble. So we're going to get them up and ready to go. The bigger problem isn't our infrastructure, although there's still stuff to fix. The bigger problem is that the channel right now has got a lot of debris and a lot of silting in it, and that's going to be a big challenge before we return to commercial traffic.
You need, if my understanding is correct, you need 9 feet, or Commerce needs about 9 feet to move those parts.
That's right. We are authorized and appropriated for a 9-foot channel throughout the entire distance from the Mississippi all the way up to the Port of Catoosa in Oklahoma. And so we share that responsibility with the Tulsa District, the Corps of Engineers.
All right, shipping, when can that is millions of dollars in cargo?
Yes, we estimate the value of shipping on the MCARNs as about $23 million a day. So we are very sensitive to the fact we need to get that commercial system open as quickly as possible. But right now, we don't know the extent of the silting that's happened in the river, and we're not sure the extent of damage. We have at least one dam in Oklahoma that's going to have trouble getting a pool recovered, meaning can we close the gates completely so that we can capture the water to keep the channel? Because as you probably saw, we had some barges crash into that particular structure, and those need to be removed so we can get those back in place. So right now, it'd be way too early to speculate on a date of when we'll be able to get it open. But I would say the river's not going to return to decent flows for that kind of travel until at least mid to late August.
So even if you had a channel, the flows itself would be, I mean, I realize that one complicates the other, but
it does. And right now, what we're looking for is we're at about 160,000 cubic feet per second. Normal is about 60 to 70 this time of year, 60 to 70,000 cubic feet per second. And when it gets down to 60 to 70, our training structures help the river self-scour that channel. And while it's up right now, there's so many solids that are suspended in the water, and we're not sure where that's going to drop out. So we need it to get back down to 60 or 70, which we expect about the last week in July, and then we have to let the river work. We have to let the flows move through the channel, and hopefully a lot of that silt that's sitting in the channel right now will then be moved off. That's the best case scenario for us.
And then a big dredging job.
Hopefully the dredging won't be too bad because of that scouring, but yes, there will be some needs. There are hot spots in the river that don't scour very well, and we'll need to get dredging assets out there.
Yeah, AJ, Gary, how much of this damage that you're having to deal with follows the river?
Well, in this particular flooding disaster, it is all along the Arkansas River. So all the counties that are there along the Arkansas are impacted or have been impacted by this event.
But there was substantial flooding in farm fields, of course.
Yes. Agricultural was impacted, of course, and the housing infrastructure, commercial along the river were impacted pretty good. One of the things that we're able to do, thanks to the Civil Air Patrol, to the Corps of Engineers, National Weather Service, or National Guard, is we were able to map the river. So we have maps of each part of the river as it crested. So we have that move down, that imagery that was captured, and then we have our state GIS office has taken that and plotted the infrastructure and our housing. And so this is some great stuff that we can use from now on, because we can move, we can look at that computer screen and we can see what the river looked like before the flooding, and we can see the impact after the flooding. And it's been a great tool to find those houses that were impacted so that we could get the assessment teams into them.
I have to suggest that probably in your tenure anyway, Mr. Gary, this was the biggest natural disaster to occur on your watch since you took office. So I put you on the spot, both of you, but what about the interplay between federal, state, and for that matter, local authorities? With a couple of weeks now and the water receding, were there any weak links that you could spot?
Great question. I appreciate you asking that, because I have been absolutely amazed since even before the crest got here of the cooperation and the partnership with our county officials, our county judges, our county emergency managers, our state agencies. This was the first. I've got people working for me that's been there for 20 years. I've been there 3. We've got people that have been there for 20 plus years. They said this is the first disaster where we had all of the state agencies, all of our emergency support functions in the Emergency Operations Center through that entire 2 weeks. We had representatives from the Corps of Engineers that were in that facility with us. We had FEMA representatives. We had the National Guard that were in there from day one, and actually a few days before, because we knew this was coming. And so we were able to really get that coordination in place and ready to go. And to me, that partnership here in Arkansas has been amazing.
Colonel, as you know, we were talking before the broadcast, my own personal experience out in the field reporting, it's not always as seamless as it evidently was in this case. What made the difference here?
Well, I tell you, I'll echo what AJ said about the cooperation at every level, and it went from local emergency management, small communities pulling together, up through the county and the state and the federal. It was probably the smoothest cooperation that I've seen in all the years that I've been doing this. And I think the success wasn't about last week. It was about 2 years ago or 5 years ago when we started doing exercises together. It was the willingness to open up to each other and say, you know what, I'm going to give credit to the state or the county or whoever is pulling the most weight at the moment, and pour in behind them. It was that cooperation that's been built over years. The first thing that I did when we realized how much water was sitting in Oklahoma that was going to be released is I picked up the phone and I called AJ, and of course he was on vacation at the time. But we went over and talked to his folks and said, here's what's coming. And I didn't have to introduce myself. I already knew them because they had invited me over and invited my emergency management folks over multiple times. So we knew each other, and that made all the difference when this went down.
All right. Colonel Dixon, AJ Gary, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Good luck to both of you.
Thank you.
And it was a 500-year flood. Homes were saved and homes were lost. For example, in the Treasure Hill subdivision of Conway, AETN was there. Look for the Rainless Flood. It is a web-first digital series by our producer Kevin Thomas Clark, and it focuses on how one Arkansas neighborhood fought the water. You'll find it on the AETN Engage blog and AETN social media outlets. And we'll be back with a roundtable in just a moment. Back with a roundtable now. Chris Hausnick joins us from the Political Science faculty at Arkansas Tech, and Wesley Brown from Talk Business and Politics, where he's a reporter and columnist. Wesley, Harvard versus Hutchinson on the matter of Medicaid and the expansion and the work requirement.
Yeah, that the Harvard study came out this week that noted that of the work requirement that the legislature approved during the session, backing Governor Hutchinson's Arkansas Works plans. Basically said of 18,000, they studied about 100,000 people, 18,000 people really that the state threw off of the Medicaid program. Basically, they couldn't find if they found jobs or if they were able to get insurance. So. And it's basically saying that that's a failure in the program. I think the Hutchinson administration has maintained what they maintained during the session, that internally we know from our own records that these people have either found other jobs or have successfully. They always point to the 3.6 job unemployment rate, saying that these people have found work in the Arkansas workforce.
Yeah, and the governor's essentially acknowledged, I think, that basically this is a political tactic, a maneuver.
Right.
Without a work requirement, I couldn't get it, period.
Right. And during the debate in the session, that obviously became, you saw the pushback from his right flank, some of the GOP members saying that, we said this would, it would come to this. Of course, the governor had the support of the Democrat minority, and it got through the session. But it was really, at a while, especially in the House, we really thought it might not get through. But it finally did toward the end of the session, and now we still have Arkansas with that Medicaid requirement.
Yeah, and Chris, during the debate, or in this analysis anyway, the digital divide, rural-urban.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that was brought up in the study that Arkansas has always had, and even the legislature acknowledged it this session, was that you had 30% of the people, because you had to confirm work, things of that nature, through internet portals, but you had 30% of the people who were surveyed were physically unable to do that because they did not have adequate broadband access to be able to do this, to report correctly. The legislature addressed this, at least partially, allowing rural broadband companies, things of that nature, to go those directions. But again, that's a long-term situation.
And the governor has actually rolled out a program since the session to say, we need to get more access to the broad. He's working with some of the internet companies, internet backbone companies, say, hey, we need to provide access to those, especially in the rural and many urban areas that don't have access to internet. So.
Congressional delegation, it obviously has its attention as well. So we'll continue that. Got to tee up the next story.
Okay. Move along.
There's a little less golf maybe going to be played in Little Rock, Wesley, and it illustrates vividly the budget bond in which a new mayor and his city council or city directors.
Yeah, Frank Scott came in on a program of bringing people together, but his first real big test with the Little Rock City Board is on the budget. Last year's budget, 2018 budget, was around 197, I think, and the projected in 2019 is 210,000, but there's a shortfall, about 7 million. So what they had to do, the first thing they've done, and they approved it this week, was to cut 2.1 million from the budget, and that comes from the parks and recreation program, specifically our two older golf courses, Hyman and War Memorial Golf Course, and these are urban type golf courses that are popular with and cheaper than Repsol and First Tee. So these two golf courses will I think in June, towards the second half of 2019, they'll start downgrading them, and then by 2020 we won't have these golf courses anymore.
Yeah, and the bigger story, Chris, may be that to some extent, Mayor Scott of Little Rock could be every mayor. There are a lot of mayors, a lot of a lot of county judges who are facing pretty grim budget numbers, even with this exploding economy.
No, I think that's accurate. There is a systematic, $7 million budget. They found a way to paste $5 million through this year, this calendar year, but that still means this time next year you're having the exact same conversation. And when they sort of said golf usage is down in all four courses together, that they're losing more than $1 million. This fixes 1/6 of your problem. Pretty quickly.
Yeah, being a golfer, I see that. You don't have as many golfers out doing the real tiger era when the millennials were coming out to the golf courses. That's the growth part of the golf industry. That's not happening. The millennials are not coming. They don't want to spend 4 hours on a golf course. So the city said, "Oh, let's take a look at these two golf courses," but this ideal of using this smoke and mirrors, they're going to have to make some other cuts, going into 2019.
Absolutely.
As you said, the urban Memphis, other cities across the South are facing these budget crunches where they have to make tough decisions. And Frank Scott, his honeymoon period is over with.
Speaking of mayors, speaking of county judges, speaking of issues, what's in the water over there where you live? Well, first we had cannabis or casinos. Now we've got cannabis up.
Yep. The casino story is going to be a much longer one going forward. I think the casino story is sort of splitting into two venues right now. One venue is with the Racing Commission dealing with their decisions, processes, and fallout. They basically said all 5 casino operators' proposals were invalid and refused them all because they didn't have a letter of support. There's rumblings, nothing's been filed yet, that there may be lawsuits either by Gulfside has come up because they had the letter that was then rescinded and that confusion. But of course there's 4 other operators who are now wondering what that is. But that's one track. It's my opinion that the part going on in Russellville is becoming very interesting, but I think they're starting to get a better grasp on it. To put it mildly, the casino referendum put a lot of power in the county judge in their position, and I was able to talk with him for a few minutes. They're figuring out, one is a lot of the process. As it stands right now, and it is subject to change, I need to put that disclaimer out at this point. It seems
it's a fluid situation.
Yes, that's a good euphemism for it. The quorum court is the one who's actually scheduled it. The judge doesn't get to. The leanings of the quorum court is to probably have a vote up or down in some form of casino, and as simply as possible, yes or no, allow the county judge to write it in the March presidential primary.
March.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a long way. And I think from the commission's point of view, and I attended that meeting where it's a really interesting meeting. Their point of view is that the local community, meaning Russellville and Pope County, they're going to have to solve that problem before you bring it back to the commission before they look at it again. We're going to need a letter of support, and their window is maybe not going to March. They mentioned at that meeting that we're looking at a 90-day window. So waiting until March 2020 may be too late for this referendum to go back before the commission. Or I'm sure they'll hear it, but still.
But the court's idea was it's a $25,000 expense for one special election for a yes or no question, and that's the big hang up. Now.
This is very distressing to Pine Bluff, Hot Springs, and West Memphis.
No.
On the business side of it, though, it is getting very interesting because you have there's a massive amount of competition now. And the one thing we're running into is not misinformation, but old information. You have 5 casino operators. They're working heavily on the ground in Russellville. They're meeting with civic organizations. They are having meet and greets, things of that nature. This is what's happening. It is not a casino anymore. This is a massive resort. They are bringing in
resort. Okay.
They're bringing in sports franchises like
Bo Jackson.
Hard Rock is working with Bo Jackson. The Cherokee Group is working with Legends, which is Jerry Jones of the Cowboys. All of a sudden, the smallest proposal is a $200 million complex. These complexes may have hit $300 million. Russellville and Pope County effectively is getting good, hard free market competition to get. There's convention centers included. There is now, some of them are bringing up, outside amphitheaters. You have a casino and hotels and restaurants and, water parks and everything else.
Now, marijuana.
Yes. I did get to briefly talk to Mayor Harris as well. Right now, because this is so new, it's still very early in the process. The mayor is working with the city attorney, discussing legal options. The lawsuit's been filed in Pope County. They are not asking for financial damages. They're asking, approve the permit. The zoning committee approved it 8-0. You had a number of city councilors come out against it for moral reasons, for voter reasons, and
more reasons on casinos and marijuana.
A lot of in Russellville, you have differences in political opinion. You have organizations, and a lot of those same organizations who oppose one do not oppose the other. The mayor, however, decided to abstain from the vote, and the license was not granted. How that plays out, it's still early. The one thing they've brought up is the city is exploring whether or not to take it to the federal courts. And I think the one sort of concern with that would be cost. Okay. It is expensive to fight in Pope County. It is even more expensive to fight in federal courts.
Yeah, and this is a trend that's happening all across the state. The Medical Marijuana Commission meeting last week, basically the launch of the medical marijuana is slowing all across the state. There's only 2 right now in the state, and those are in Hot Springs.
Yeah, good news for South Arkansas, some not so good news up in Northwest Arkansas, but that's the nature of the market.
Right. There are a lot of jobs announcements recently. Lockheed Martin, the governor went over to the Paris Air Show as he goes every year, and he's made announcements every year. Aerospace Rocketdyne was an announcement last year, but this year Lockheed is going to expand their big industrial complex where they build the Patriot missile and the THAAD missile. Almost 142 million, about 363 jobs are coming to South Arkansas. That complex is amazing. If you go down there, it's huge. There was a story we wrote the other day about the export market, the industrial market for weapons and in the industry in Arkansas is now the #1 export market in the state, 1.8 billion market now. But there's other job announcements where down in South Arkansas, in Hope and Crossett, Georgia Pacific announced they're going to cut 563 jobs. Harrison just announced this week that they're going to cut another older manufacturing plant that about 150 jobs there. So you have good job announcement and bad jobs announcement, and it's balancing out our Unemployment rate right now is 3.16, but nationally and statewide, that number of job growth that we've saw the last 18 months is starting to slow down, which could affect a number of other areas in our economy.
Well, our friends at Bentonville are cutting a very big check, but not as big as the one the SEC originally proposed.
Right. They're going to cut, I think, about 282 million check.
Call it 300.
Yeah, a round number, 300 million. And basically, this is an issue that goes back to 2017. Walmart had prepared for this. They've had it down in Brazil and South America, just issues of fraud and bribery in their interactions with those governments down there, and so what the SEC came in, and they've been looking at this for several years, came out this week and said we're going to fine Walmart. Walmart had already wrote this in their earnings back down in 2017, and their CEO McKillen basically said we're glad that this is over. Now we can continue to grow our operations down in South America and get this out off our books right now.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, especially a lot of the allegations, the ones they pled guilty to were in Brazil. Brazilian politics have been racked with corruption. At least 2 former presidents have been indicted, almost half the cabinet. So this sort of, doing business in Brazil is tricky. For a multinational corporation, a lot of Walmart's rapid expansion into international markets, because other places were under investigation. Yes, they pled guilty in Brazil, but they were also being investigated for their actions in Mexico, India, China as well. So to be able to lay all this to rest and sort of becomes a buyer beware when you have these local partners. Who are you getting in bed with? How are they doing business? That was a big part of this, the investigation. What was going on between Bentonville and these foreign subsidiaries?
Yeah, guys, got to end it there because we're simply out of time. Thanks very much for watching us, and join us next week for Arkansas Week. See you then.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.